Hi everyone, I'm Let 'em Taters. You can call me Taters. In this video, I'm evaluating the newest champ to enter the battle realm, the spiky armored Cable clone Stryfe. While I'm at it, I'll also grade Cable. If you're not familiar with Stryfe, here's his abbreviated backstory. In an alternate reality from Marvel's main universe, in 2,000 years into the future, Earth is ruled over by the merciless Apocalypse. Rachel Summers, daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, leads a resistance cult called the Ascani. She sends a sister of the cult back in time to confront the X-Men who had just defended the kidnapping of Nathan Summers, later to be known as Cable, against servants of Apocalypse. But by that point, Nathan had been infected by his techno-organic virus, and Sister Ascani convinced Nathan's father, Cyclops, to allow her to take him into the future where advanced science and medicine could save him. In that future, anxious still of Nathan's chances of survival, the Ascani cloned him, and soon thereafter, Apocalypse kidnapped the clone, thinking it was Nathan. Apocalypse raised the clone as Stryfe, intent on transferring his consciousness into Stryfe's body, but once he realized Stryfe was a clone, Apocalypse abandoned him, and Stryfe became the vengeful villain nicknamed the Chaos Bringer. The first stat is practical DPS. For my definitions of each stat, reference the description box. But the key word here is practical. Champs whose kits were designed to heavily benefit from ramp up can be complicated to judge against champs who weren't. Because Power Index attempts to be a more numerically based assessment tool, it's important for me to standardize my interpretation of practical as it applies specifically to ramp up characters. And while this standardization may evolve the more such champs I make videos on, for now I'm going to set entry into the third fight with the champ as the line in the sand. If by Fight 3 they're still not at their apex, or it would take considerable effort to get them there by that point, their practical DPS score has to reckon for that. Stryfe's base attack and crit rate are dead average, both within 2 points of the 50th percentile. His crit damage is poor, but he's a ramp-up champ and has external damage sources, so not a huge deal. His damage, really his entire kit, is built around his telepathic charges, which, among other things, add 90 attack to his rating per stack. He has a 50% chance to gain a telepathic charge on heavies, but this is increased by 15% based on how many bars of power he has. If he's holding 1 bar at the time of his heavy, there's a 70% chance. 2 bars, 85%. With a full power meter, it's 100%. At max sig, he has a 20% chance to gain an extra charge when gaining 1. He gains 1 per miss caused by his invisibility, more on that shortly, and if he heavies while invisible, he gains 3 extra charges. These charges max at 20 and convert into persistent charges with his SP3, which also adds 5 charges itself. So if you throw an SP3 with 20 charges, you bank 25 persistent ones. The persistent charges cap at 100 per quest and can't be reduced or reset, so his absolute max number of telepathic charges, persistent and standard combined, is 120, by building 20 charges while holding 100 persistent charges. And at max telepathic charges, his attack rating gets a bonus of 10,800, bringing his total attack to just under 13,800, 4.6 times his starting value and 3.6 times Doom's base value. It's phenomenal DPS. But once we factor in the practical element and compare it to other champs with drastic attack increase abilities, the shimmer fades for me. At max ramp, Stryfe's attack is 64% higher than Fury's attack when his Fury buff is active, but only 15% higher than Namor with just a single Fury passive, and 7% lower than Kang's with 20 Fury buffs from the Apocalypse synergy. I chose these comps because of how easy they are to attain. Fury just needs to discard his life model decoy or lose his first life. Namor just needs to throw a single SP3. Kang just needs to stay alive for 80 seconds. That's 1 minute and 20 seconds. Stryfe, however, needs at minimum 4 SP3 attacks or to naturally store charges through multiple fights in a quest. He carries over 70% at max sig, and while filling his power meter, he has to also build standard charges he can bank, and to review, your options for building them beyond 5 are cause opponents to miss attacks during a 3-second invisibility window to add 1 per miss his own attacks at the benefit of 1 charge gained per miss, land a heavy attack, or land a heavy attack while invisible. And if he has at least 5 charges, taking a single hit automatically consumes 5 to glance the attack. We'll discuss his playstyle in more detail in a moment, but my point is that the build-up process is arduous, fragile, and can be downright maddening if you make 1 slip-up and lose 5 charges in an instant. On his own, free of synergies or teammate effects, His base attack plus telepathic charge bonuses would warrant a 6 from me. But he also has some decent passive shock damage, which he applies on SP1s, which lasts for 8 seconds, and which he can refresh indefinitely with mediums, heavies, and or SP2s through psionic blasts. It deals 393 energy damage per second, which is 13% of his base attack rating, and it scales with his telepathic charges, so over 16,000 passive energy damage per second at full buildup. He's getting a 7 in practical DPS. His absolute max damage potential is a 10, but among champs capable of that level of damage, his ramp up is the slowest and most painstaking. Strife ranks top 25 in armor and block proficiency, but bottom 70 in health, out of 174 6-star characters. He can glance attacks, but only if he's holding at least 5 telepathic charges, in which expends 5 charges. It's honestly a huge nuisance because the build-up to his otherwise mediocre damage is so fickle. And he can also go invisible for 3 seconds following his SP1, or at a 40% chance on glances at max sig, causing opponents to miss, but this is more of an offensive ability and hardly lasts long enough to be a worthwhile sustainability tool. He gets a 5 in this category. Nothing in power control or suicide's compatibility. He has no immunities, and his most efficient rotation for building his telepathic charges involves repetitive SP1 invisibility heavy cycles, which we'll discuss for his playability grade, but which directly conflict with recoil. Strife has some interesting and pretty useful utility. For starters, his psionic blast hits from mediums, heavies, and SP2s deal energy damage, great for fighting Korgs, can't be evaded, and like Omega Red's tentacle hits, bypass passive direct damage. This is worth somewhere between 1 and 2 points. He can trade 2 telepathic charges to remove unstoppable buffs from opponents and passively stun them for 1.2 seconds. This wouldn't get a full point because of its niche use and the nuanced play required to pull it off without accidentally being intercepted, and it doesn't apply to characters with psychic shielding, such as Juggernaut, Magneto, or Unstoppable Colossus, although Stryfe does have psychic shielding himself. But it's worth noting and contributes to his utility score. And lastly, and this is my favorite, he inflicts a stacking 12-second passive concussion on light-ending combos that reduces ability accuracy by 20% at the cost of 1 telepathic charge, and if the opponent is shocked, he applies a stronger, longer, 30% concussion on his SP3 that lasts for 30 seconds. He can block unblockable attacks while his foe is concussed, by the way. SP3 plus 4 light ending combos, and the sum of your concussions is 110% ability accuracy reduction. It's not as easy and simple as Quake or Archangel, but easy and simple aren't really synonymous with Strife. 3 points in utility. Speaking of easy and simple, Strife isn't, relative to the whole of the game's roster. First, his build-up. The fastest way to build this guy up without synergies is to throw your SP1, which triggers a very brief 3-second invisibility, incite your opponent to hit into you and miss, and throw a heavy in their face. This works similarly to Surfer's phase mechanic, except to manually trigger it requires an SP1 instead of a more convenient heavy attack. Repeat until you've built 15 to 20 charges, then throw an SP3 to bank them, then start over. And don't get hit at all during this process, lest you forfeit 5 charges. If you played this guy straight up, without utilizing his invisibility to quicken the build-up process, the ramp takes considerably longer and is bound to leave you even more frustrated if you slip up and get clipped. Another 3 here. Overall, Strife gets a 5.70, upper echelon of tier 4, the average group. If you view him as purely an in-game content clear and are prepared to build a team around him for that, you'll like him a lot more than I do. And reminder that Power Index doesn't incorporate synergies or team member benefits. In my opinion, evaluating an individual champ as the focal point of a multi-champ team is really just evaluating a team, and grading teams is a lot different than grading champs. Okay, here's your throw-in. Cable. The real Cable. Nathan Summers. He has average damage, average sustainability, no power control, no compatibility with suicides, he's easy to play, and he gets 3 points in utility for his power gain buff, which applies at a 50% rate when reaching a bar of power, a nice 17-second true strike on his SP3, and a 90% chance on landed SP2s to inflict a 90% concussion for 11 seconds, which is pretty strong. His final score is 5.23, a tier below his angry clone. Here's the full tier chart with the Nathans plopped in. Thanks for tuning into this quick entry. This is the first video I've done on a champ not yet released to the community at the time of this writing, so it's possible some of his category tallies could get tweaked in the future, but for now I'm just sad he didn't give me the tingles. And if you're wondering how he stacks up against Aegon, a champ he'll likely be compared to for a long time, the short answer is not favorably, at least according to Power Index. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video.